just like that, it's Thursday night, and you know what that means, people. It's party time with the Video Bros. I'm Bobby Munson, and the man beside me, the man with the angelic voice, Papa Smokes. Papa Smokes, how are you doing, brother?
Good to see you, Munson. I'm doing great. Happy Thursday night to everybody. Let's do some Ring Respect Radio, baby.
Ring Respect Radio, indeed, and of course, we have got a brand new segment coming up for you guys right away here, so stay tuned for that. As we say hello to our friends in the chat, we're talking to our good friend Ed Fries, co-host of Taking Over on Tuesday nights with the Natural Astro Bizarro, also co-host of Marvel Talk with Andre C. I'm sure, Ed, I'd imagine we got some episodes of Echo to be reviewing here coming up soon. I would hope so anyway. Looking forward to seeing that. And of course, our good friend JJ Joshua Joseph, you saw him in those opening clips as well too, because he's been right here on the show. He says, how's it going, crew? Go check out all the work that JJ is doing there with the In Your House crew, as well as a moment with Joshua Joseph that you can find where you can find all your favorite podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, Papa Smokes, Ring Respect Radio is on Spotify. We got it on there.
Oh, yeah.
I think they'll take anybody's work, but they've got some Video Bros on there now. 2 episodes now up there, and this one will be there very shortly as well, too.
Now anybody can find us, Munson. We hit the big time in a way.
That's right. No more hiding in the shadows for the Video Bros. As we say hello to our good friend DJ, who's up in the house. DJ, how are you doing, brother? Thanks for stopping in. We've, of course, got Mr. MLW himself, Brian Carter, who also wants to talk about old school wrestling, talking about those fabulous Freebirds, and they're going to be talked about quite heavily in this program. That is for damn sure. And, of course, we got BDJ saying, what an intro, Munson. Can feel the electricity here tonight. As we say hello to the third Video Bro, he's there, right there, Mr. Basser himself. Hey, what's up, Basser? How you doing?
What's up, Basser?
My friend. And Basser can't wait till that next PPW show. But even before then, we gotta get a Video Bro beer night going one of these nights here, guys. I think it's more than overdue. So we'll have to set something up very soon. And hello to our good friend Melball Collins, who you're going to be able to catch tomorrow right here on Twitch and YouTube at our local establishment with Andre C. bringing you Andre and Mel's Japanese wrestling update for the first time at our local establishment. That's 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow evening. So, man, I'm looking forward to it, Pop Smokes. I'm pumped. A lot of cool new shows coming here to our local establishment in 2024.
Absolutely. And anytime we can get some people that are following closely and are experts of some area of wrestling that's just outside of what's normally covered around here, I love it. Let's do the focus on Japanese wrestling. I'm totally down.
That's right. Japanese wrestling is going to be covered. You know, we like to cover some MLW, some old school stuff as well, too. This Saturday, you're going to be able to catch myself and the Natural Astro Bizarro bringing you the TNA Hard to Kill post show right here on our local establishment. And also coming up very soon here on Thursday nights following Ring Respect Radio. This is going to be starting in February. We're going to have a couple of newcomers here to our local establishment bringing you what's going to be known as the Honor Ramble, talking all things ROH following Ring Respect Radio. So Thursday nights are going to be jam-packed full of fun coming up very soon here, Papa Smokes.
Very cool, very cool. And for our listeners and people that want to hear some wrestling takes a little bit outside the box, stay tuned to Ole Podcast Thursday night. Sounds like we're getting all the bases covered, Munson.
We sure are. Hard at work making it happen. As Brian said, Papa Smokes was missed last Saturday night because Misery Loves Company, Kings of Coliseum, was not good. Yes, I believe my comment exactly was dumpster fire. I know Alex Kane thinks otherwise. He's talking that it was a great card top to bottom. That's if there was only 2 matches and it was the last 2 on the card that you could actually say that. But sure, I guess so, Alex Kane. But I thought it was a pure dumpster fire. Brian thought it was a pure dumpster fire. I hope they do better next time out on February the 3rd. That's all I can say.
Well, yeah, damn, I hope so. Looks like I dodged a bullet with that one, but I still would like to see the championship match and Fatu versus Riddle. Haven't gone back and watched those yet.
I can hook you up there, Pop Smokes, that's for sure. As we say hello to Astrid. How are you doing, Astrid? Thanks for joining the Video Bros on a Thursday night. Glad to see you. Astrid, as I said, going to be joining me this Saturday for the TNA Hard to Kill post show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to Alexander Hammerstone making that TNA debut, and then a ton of other matches. Lots of other matches. You could say plenty of other matches to talk about that night on the show. It's going to be fantastic. And we got former Twitch Trivia Champion up in the house, They're Amazing, joining us. Good evening, gentlemen. And They're Amazing. I got news for you and everybody in the chat, because next Thursday night, we're doing wrestling trivia right here on Ring Respect Radio. That's right, the Video Bros bring you what the fuck do we know about wrestling pub trivia night. I've lost count, but we're going to bring it to you, and the championships are on the line, so stay tuned and enjoy some pub trivia next Thursday night. It's going to be great. We missed the angelic voice of Papa Smokes last Saturday. We sure did. I couldn't agree with you more. And yes, Thor Jr. is Alexander Haverstone, and he will be at TNA this Saturday night. Surprise signings apparently too. Sweet. I can't wait for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And let's go, says They're Amazing. Speaking of let's go, Papa Smokes, I think we need to get on with a segment that we have teased for quite some time. We've talked about it. We've readied it. And it's time for the very first trip through the territories. Here we go. Let's start this in the right fashion. That's right. Ring Respect Radio presents the trip through the territories. Part 1. We're talking about world-class championship wrestling, notoriously known for the Von Erich family. Anybody who has seen the movie The Iron Claw will know a little insight into what we're talking about here tonight. And I will say, if you haven't seen The Iron Claw yet and you're trying to avoid spoilers, as much as I don't want to send you away, everything that we will talk about tonight will spoil a lot of the Iron Claw if you're not familiar with the story, because it plays right into world-class championship wrestling and the Von Erich family. And we will talk about maybe a little bit of omissions or changes that they made between the Iron Claw and the actual story of the Von Erich family. I should say, in the Iron Claw made her cry. My wife bawled her eyes out while she was watching it. She couldn't believe it was a true story. And it's a fantastic film. Like, let's get it all wrong. Right. The acting in that was superb. I thought the acting was great. The fact that all the guys in this learned to become professional wrestlers to actually do this movie, just brilliant. Did you also catch Pop Smoke's MJF's little cameo in this movie too?
Of course, I was waiting for it.
Yeah, it was great, definitely. JJ cried a lot as well too. Amazing movie. It's a brilliant film, and we're not gonna nitpick the omissions or anything like that. I understand. I've read the director's reasoning for omitting certain portions of the actual story and changing a few things up. So it would really be nitpicking for all the wrong reasons when it comes to telling the Von Erich story. And I'm just happy to see that this movie is not only done quite well, it's done very well for itself, Papa Smokes. In fact, the last thing I saw was that the film cost a total of $15 million to make, and it had already exceeded $25 million in theatrical runs thus far, making it a very successful movie for A24 Studios.
Well, good. And it is a fine movie, something that lots of people would like to see. But for us wrestling people out there, it's an important movie because it puts wrestling right up in the mainstream. It shows a story of wrestlers that are regular people with families and feelings and all that stuff too. Puts pro wrestling in the spotlight in a Hollywood movie. Always good for the business when that many people get their eyes on a story about the business and the people in it.
Okay, and let's talk about this business as we start this off here, Papa Smoke. So let's talk about Fritz Von Erich for a minute, or more than a minute, honestly. Fritz Von Erich, also Jack Adkisson. What they show you in the movie right away is him with his two sons at the time, Kevin and David, as well as his wife. And when he buys that Cadillac at the beginning, all that portion, that 100% true, that story has been told before about the buying of the Cadillac, all this kind of thing, him being told to, look the part, be the part kind of thing. What they don't really get into is that he actually wrestled for a couple of years under his actual name as Jack Adkisson before donning the name Fritz Von Erich. He actually originally had gone even to Ed McElmore, who owned the Sportatorium in Dallas, and started by doing his taxes. He was taking odd jobs and things like that to be able to pay the bills while also being able to do professional wrestling. And it wasn't until a later return that he had donned the name Fritz Von Erich, and we can talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about that earlier stage there of kind of Fritz's early run into the business.
Well, as Jack Adkisson, he was just kind of one of the typical wrestlers at the time, a big guy, decent looking guy, athletic and all that stuff. So they had him he wrestled mostly as a baby face under his real name, once again, using amateur wrestling skill. Jack Adkisson, he had a modicum of success just as a babyface under his own name. But you mentioned Macklemore, of course, not thrift shop Macklemore, but the owner of the Sportatorium. Once Macklemore had passed away, and Fritz was the sole owner of the company now, he realized that he was going to have to take the spot as the top guy in that company, and just his regular name and his non-gimmick was not going to cut it. And he realized this, so he knew that he had to change things up a little bit, which is when he decided to go with the sort of Nazi gimmick of Fritz Von Erich. Started wearing the cape with the swastika on it and the monocle and the whip and all that stuff. Controversial sounding now for sure, and it was at the time. Imagine at the time it was 20 years removed from Hitler and World War II and all that. There were some soft spots that touched with a lot of people, but in a society that hadn't yet come around to political correctness and stuff, this gimmick was a heat magnet. So Fritz knew that he could be the main guy in the territory as a heel, booking himself as champion for a lot of that too, and then bringing in lots of baby faces to face the evil Fritz.
That's right. Yeah. And that's it is something that is, right in many ways, rightfully so omitted from the movie, is talking about the persona that he adopted. They do play on the fact that the Von Erich name was adopted from his grandmother, who was a Von Erich. So the name isn't a complete falsehood. He actually does come from a Von Erich heritage and adopted the name, and then put Fritz in there so that he could be a German sympathizer, as they refer to him. But he was a very feared, very revered man back in those times, Papa Smoke, unlike what would become of his sons and become of him later in life, because even in the movie, they kind of show you that jump directly to Fritz Von Erich, the family man, and some of the boys growing up. And I will say, Chris Von Erich actually completely omitted from this film entirely. There is another Von Erich brother that was not put in here. Reason the director mentioned this was because of the timing of the film. We're talking about a 2-hour movie already, that there was not enough time to flesh out another one of the stories of the brothers with the, committing suicide and everything like that. Although it still had a very large impact on the family, and how could it not?
For sure. And I mean, when did Hollywood ever worry about telling an accurate story? They take an overreaching story that is compelling in some manner, and then they just tweak it to make sure that story is told perfectly in their movie. And that's artistic license. No book or movie is completely accurate as to what happened. As far as we know. I mean, obviously we weren't there, but Hollywood's not trying to produce a historical document here. They're trying to tell a fulfilling story.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're looking to do. BDJ wants to know from us, who is the wrestler you guys would like to see a Hollywood movie given to next? And it's a very strong question there, Papa Smokes. And I got to go to you on this one and ask, who do you think? I know who I'd like to see if they could do it, and I really don't know who you could even get to start to portray him, but I think Andre the Giant has such a story that I would love to see an Andre the Giant biopic of some sort. But how do you find somebody that can be Andre the Giant without having to Hollywood up the old special effects there.
Yeah, that's a good pick. That's a good pick. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of good stories that you could use. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think Astrid's got it there with Eddie Guerrero, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of someone with a really dramatic story too. I mean, there are guys that faced death and huge. I saw that nasty, nasty BDJ.
Yeah.
Here's another good suggestion.
Yeah, Vincent Kennedy McMahon and Andre from Colossal Cravings, says Mel. Shout out to Colossal Cravings, Andre the Giant right there. He could play Andre the Giant in a biopic. Astrid also saying, or even Rey Mysterio as well would be a good one. Brian Carter wants the Hulk Hogan story, but I don't know. Are we ever going to get the truthful Hulk Hogan story, or are we just going to get what Hulk Hogan wants to tell you is the Hulk Hogan story? Brian saying, or the El Assassino motion picture. Yeah, somehow that counts. I mean, I love the idea. I'd love to get in the mind of El Assassino, but I'm not too sure. Yeah, Ed's Wrestler of the Ed's Wrestler of the Year. Jesus Christ. Let's move on from that already. Dominic fucking Mysterio.
Yeah, I saw that.
Astrid saying, LOL, it's full of lies, so might as well listen to his interviews. It's the same. Hey, he's always in kayfabe. He's, if according to him, he saved the world 6 times over. But back onto the WCCW track here, Pop spoke. So after Fritz came back to Dallas and adopted that name, like you said, he ended up partnering more so with Macklemore in the territory. We're talking about Fort Worth, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston, which originally was controlled out of the Houston Wrestling office around 1965 before Ed and Fritz bothered to split that territory away originally from that governing body at the time, before eventually then taking it over fully themselves, the entire territory, prior to Ed's passing away and Fritz taking 100% control of the territory.
Yeah, and remember, in terms of a territory, how many miles this is too. Texas is a big state. It's a real big state. So if you've got, how many cities there, Munson, did you mention? 4? Fort Worth?
Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas, and San Antonio.
Yeah. That's a lot of damn miles. So that's one of the challenges of a promoter too, is sending your wrestlers around the loop and making sure they get there, making sure they make their dates, making sure those shows and payoffs and all that go smoothly. And the boys got to jump in the car, turn around and come back, or make the whole circuit and come around. It's a lot of driving. And as those territory wrestlers will tell you, half of your life is spent in the car. That's why those times were so valuable to those guys, because depending on who you were riding with, the younger guys could ask the veterans all kinds of questions, all kinds of road stories, everything about booking, finishes, different promoters, payouts, buildings, ring rats, all that kind of stuff would be talked about in the car, and the younger guys would get the education. So sometimes a lot of those miles were beneficial to them building the young guys up on the roster. You
bet. And as Astrid saying, can't wait to hear the fact that you can't talk Von Erichs without talking Freebirds, and we're going to get to that very soon. It plays huge into this storyline for sure. But yes, so that territory that Fritz eventually took over once Macklemore passed away was known as Southwest Championship Sports. So he had taken full control of Southwest Championship Sports and World Class Championship Wrestling, where he started to bring his sons in who had not necessarily, I think David had picked up the wrestling first prior to Kevin picking it up, but Kevin ended up getting to it shortly after and kind of taking a little bit of that limelight. He did the championship run within WCCW prior to David, although many still say to this day that David was the stronger in-ring worker, and had it not been for his tragic passing, would have been one of the names that we talk about today for the greatest feuds in professional wrestling history. And don't forget that David was the oldest boy. Aside from, they had a young
boy that died accidentally as a toddler, which was very sad. But other than that, David was the oldest boy, so Fritz showed him a lot of preferential treatment, so to speak, took him on the road lots. David got exposed to the business more, had watched more matches, had Fritz explain wrestling psychology to him in the car over some of those long rides, all that kind of stuff. So David was soaking in the finer points of the business and of wrestling psychology earlier on than Kevin, even though he was younger. But Kevin was the more natural athlete, so he was doing track at school, doing football full time and all that stuff too. So Kevin came in a little after. David was considered the prodigy. He was tall. He looked just like Fritz, and he had the Fritz's rub on him, so to speak. And Fritz had eyes for David to be NWA World Champion sooner rather than later.
Yeah, he sure did. And during that, he was starting to push the boys in WCCW. That was broadcast on Channel 11 out of Dallas, Texas. So at the time, this is a funny story that they tell, that their show was starting to get pirated out in the Middle East. World Class Championship Wrestling was getting somehow pirated across seas in the Middle East. And so that's when they kind of came to this conclusion and this thought that they had to make a change in professional wrestling. And the boys saw things different than Papa Fritz did. They saw this opportunity to go more global and this opportunity to do things better. And I know I teased it last week in saying that a lot of people talk about Vincent Kennedy McMahon as being this global pioneer of having changed the game of how professional wrestling is looked at, how it is seen. But the Von Erichs kind of took a big stab at it first. They were the pioneers in WCCW to change the game with how camera angles are done in professional wrestling. One of the big things they did is brought in a big production, had camera men around the ring with the roaming cameras and stuff like that. So you could get more of a feel. You could get inside the ring instead of the classic old 2-person camera shots that were shot at a steady angle for so many years before that.
That's one of the things that's often talked about with world-class wrestling is the high production value. And Fritz had an in with the local TV studio, knew somebody there, and was hands-on in the meetings about production and such. He explained to the crew what he wanted, how he wanted it to look, how it was going to go, where the various spots were. This was at a time where a lot of even TV crews weren't smartened up, that the matches were somewhat choreographed and all that. You didn't want to smarten them up because the less people knowing the truth about the matter was the better, right? So Fritz very hands-on with that, and that's why they got such great production value out of that too. That must be a Texas thing, Munson, because you remember we watched and reviewed years ago some of those matches from Houston. They also had the great camera work. Do you remember that Sheep Herders versus the Fantastics?
Yep.
Great stuff. And those guys down in Texas were ahead of the curve at that time in terms of production and letting the crew know how this sport and this production is supposed to look and how it's going to translate onto TV.
You bet. And what they also had is that they had a quarterly large, I guess I want to call it a pay-per-view, but it's not a pay-per-view because back then it wasn't really pay-per-view push, but they had a large show that they would put on, which was referred to as Star Wars, where this was like the cream of the crap, anyone that they could get to really bring in there the top names in the business in that territory, all on one show for the fans to see, and became a very big deal down there.
Well, that's the idea, is the predecessor to WrestleMania, right? Not just once a year, but having it quarterly, but constructing a big show and bringing in a whole bunch of talent and then getting a larger venue. Sportatorium, not that huge of a building considering the buzz they had going for a long time. Lots of sellouts, but for the big Star Wars shows, you're going to have to get the college stadium, the football stadium, and boy, they had no problem filling those seats either with the tremendous business that they were doing that time with the Von Erich boys. And just before we get too far away from Fritz Von Erich, I wanted to bring up just another thing about his career as a wrestler. I don't know how many matches you watched prepping for this show, Munson. I was going to watch a whole bunch of the boys' famous matches, but I started with Fritz, and man, I went down the rabbit hole watching Fritz Von Erich matches. He's awesome.
Yeah.
It's not like he's the most skilled and charismatic worker of all time, but as a heel and as a stiff worker, my God, some of that stuff looks great. And the Japanese trips that he did, the fans were so scared of him, and you can see how strong he's working with his opponents. I think he ran his promotion old school in that way as well. An iron fist, a heavy hand. Anybody that doesn't like anything, too bad. He either beats you up and sends you out of here, or you can just quit and leave at that time. And that would be kind of a hallmark of new old school promoter versus new school. Fritz very much in that old school, the kind of promoter that you feared ever to cross or feared to ever say, I don't like my payout. It's not big enough. You guys made a huge gate and my payout doesn't reflect that. Nah, I don't think too many guys would go up to Fritz with a complaint like that at that time. And a lot of speculation as to, in real life, how nice or how mean of a guy was Fritz Von Erich.
Well, yeah, I mean, even to go back to the Iron Claw for a minute, they show a scene of him ranking his sons in here. And this is a story the Von Erichs, or Kevin has told many times before, that his dad legitimately ranked his sons based on the way he perceived them as being the top in the family to move ahead in the business and stuff like that too. So when he ranks the boys in that breakfast scene in the Iron Claw, is according to what the Von Erichs have said, that is 100% true.
Yeah, a tough man, and he expected a lot from his sons. I imagine that him saying that verbally to those boys was meant to inspire them to greatness, inspire them to work harder. But you got to think of a dad saying that to boys and young men. It's got a strong psychological effect, and that had to be tough for those guys.
Well, yeah, and we know that the psychological effect would end up taking its toll on most of the Von Erich family, and we are going to get to that inevitably here, Papa Smokes. But again, we want to do some of this focus on WCCW, and WCCW wouldn't have maybe exploded like it did had it not been for one of the greatest feuds in professional wrestling, something that inevitably happened. But first, they had to bring the stars in to get to that, and when I talk about bringing in stars, I'm talking about the fabulous Freebirds. Like Astrid mentioned earlier in her comment, you can't mention WCCW and the Von Erichs without mentioning the fabulous Freebirds, who came in, and at first, they were on the side of the Von Erich brothers. These guys were pals. They were friends. They all got along. Everything was hunky-dory and good in the land of world-class championship wrestling between these two sets of great athletes. Until one notorious night, and talking about our trivia nights that we do here, Papa Smokes, this was actually a part of a question that I asked at the last trivia show in December, dealing with 1982 on Christmas Day. We had that steel cage matchup that took place that very night when Ric Flair was going one-on-one, and I believe it was with let me get correct me, Papa Smokes. I'm looking through my notes. It was with, yeah. Just saying if I can find it. 1982. Yeah, it was Kerry Von Erich versus Ric Flair that very night. So. Yeah, and Michael P.S. Hayes, he was the guest referee in that ring. And again, at this point in time, still on the same page, still on the same time, but on the same side. But what ended up occurring was that Hayes kind of was trying to provoke Kerry Von Erich to take an easy pin over Ric Flair after interference had occurred and everything like that. Take the easy win, kid. And Kerry was torn. He couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't want to take that simple win over Ric Flair that very night. And that's when a little bit of chaos and disorder happened over near the side of the cage, and Ric Flair ends up coming and kicking Kerry into Michael Hayes, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the case. Hayes thinks it's intentional, and then Terry Gordy on the outside ends up smacking the cage door into Kerry Von Erich, allowing Ric Flair the victory and igniting one of the greatest feuds in professional wrestling history, the fabulous Freebirds and the Von Erichs.
And that cage door slam at one moment started one of the biggest programs in wrestling history, as some of our listeners have been saying. Not too many feuds that went longer and drew more money than Freebirds versus Von Erichs. And fantastic work there, because the wrestlers were all friends behind the scenes, but you would have never known that at the time. But it was the perfect thing. The Von Erichs were pure baby faces. I mean, they were the sons of Texas. They were everybody in Texas. They were their sons, their brothers, their husbands. They loved them, and they were just like everybody else in Texas, strong of moral character and strong of body as well. Good wrestlers coming in to push the forces of good over the forces of evil. And then here come the Freebirds. They're the exact opposite. They're the bad boys. They're from Bad Street, USA. Whereas the Von Erichs come out with the cartons of milk to drink. There's Michael Hayes and the boys with the Jack Daniels. And this was rock and roll versus gospel. This was bad boys versus good boys, devils versus angels. It was a perfect matchup of two teams that couldn't be more opposite. And then when they started becoming rivals in the ring, they had the same thing on the mind. They wanted to get to the top of the company, weren't going to let the other ones get in the way. Wow, what a bunch of matches this spawned. Bunch of classic shit. Bunch of just the promos, the vitriol that they were spewing at each other. Great promos on both sides, and a whole ton of heat, and then a whole ton of those big stadium matches that featured the six-man tags of the Von Erichs versus the Freebirds.
You bet. I want to name a few, quite a few names here that were young in the business at the time. The World Class Championship Wrestling gave a start to that, would end up becoming very big names within the industry here, Papa Smokes. And I'll name them off here, and then we can talk about them a little bit more in depth. But we're talking about names like Bill Irwin, the Iceman King Parsons, Jimmy Garvin, who came in with Sunshine at first, but eventually had a little bit of a change of heart there when he found, which it was Precious, I believe was the name of his second LA, which was his real life wife, actually, which led to one of the greatest little feuds for professional wrestling on the women's side of things, when Precious and Sunshine had a thing going because of Jimmy Garvin. We also had Chris Adams, the Ugandan giant Kamala, which was somebody almost unheard of and unseen on television at the time. Very scary guy. The Missing Link, which was Tui Robertson. And then we had Bruiser Brody, another massive name in that territory as well, too.
Yeah, and Texas was and always had been a hotbed for pro wrestling, depending on the area. But since the 30s and 40s, it attracted guys that worked in the oil business, on the oil rigs, tough guys that used to do, before there were worked finishes and choreographed spots, they were just basically like MMA fights, kind of. And it always had a big audience in Texas, so lots of money to be made there and attracted lots of wrestlers. Fritz set this company up with a great business plan. I mean, he had 5 good-looking, athletic sons. He had already set it up as a monster heel, but now he's got these 5 awesome sons that he's just going to take. Those are going to be his. He didn't know if all 5 were going to wrestle, but he was going to have at least 3 or 4 of those sons be top baby faces in his company forever, until they start having sons that become the top baby faces of that same company. So now what Fritz has to do as a Von Erich, as a promoter, is bring in a series of heels to feed to those baby faces. So hence the WCCW or World Class kind of revolved around the two big heel factions. One was headed by General Skandor Akbar. That was called Devastation Incorporated, and he had the wackier side of things, the Kamalas, the missing links, the who else did he have? Hercules Hernandez, One Man Gang, King Kong Bundy. So lots of kind of oddities and big guys like that. A real strange looking faction that grew and grew throughout time. And then Gary Hart was the other main heel manager, smaller, stable, but more serious and higher up the card than Akbar's. Gary Hart had the great Kabuki brother. That was his main guy, Kabuki, Al Perez, and then a couple of other wrestlers throughout there. Gary Hart, as a manager, watched some of his stuff once, and he never grew on me until just a few years ago. I started watching more of his stuff, and what a great manager. He's not outlandish and bombastic like Heenan and Cornette, but very smart, cuts a very good promo. And if you know Gary Hart, you know that he was doing a lot of booking, a lot of promoting in the background, a wrestling guy all the way through, understood everything about the business, and his promos, good stuff, man. I love it.
That's a good testament to Gary Hart. Gonna have to check more of them out. Yeah, but some of these names, I mean, they had done a lot of great building. They also had a lot of other names come through, like Buddy Rogers, for example, who had one of the most red hot feuds in the company with the Iceman King Parsons, when they had the moment when Parsons rubbed the hair remover cream all over Buddy Rogers' hair. All the hair goes for Buddy Rogers, and he started wearing wig after wig throughout the different shows that he was putting on with Parsons at the time, and the two of them exploded with this great rivalry.
Yeah, Buddy Roberts, not Rogers.
Sorry.
Yeah, Buddy Roberts from the Freebirds. Yeah, he was like the veteran member of the Freebirds that kind of taught Hayes and Gordy the way of the road for professional wrestling. Yeah. I also saw some of that clip with that neat or nair all over his head that had to just be burning. And
yeah. I mean, you've seen a lot of this reenacted in professional wrestling when you have a hair versus hair match and a guy gets buzzed and ends up wearing wigs to cover up the fact that he's now bald underneath. I mean, we've seen it all before in the past kind of thing. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Molly Holly did the same thing at one point in time in WWE as well too. And so you've seen all of these different acts happening, and it's great to see that has all been based on a lot of this history in professional wrestling. People know how to pay homage, so to speak, to what's been done before them. And kudos. I went back and I watched some of these matches between these two, and great stuff that they were putting on. Yeah. In fact, you know what? Just so everyone knows, you can go on YouTube, and there are tons of not only the matches, but the actual programs of World Class Championship Wrestling that you can find right on YouTube today and watch this stuff.
Yeah, there are some channels where guys have incredible archives of all that stuff. And it's one thing to watch match by match if you want to just see somebody's matches or see two wrestlers against each other. You can look up their match, but I like to watch the whole show because some of those are hilarious, especially the ones from the 70s and 80s. Some of those ones you get the commercials and all that.
Yeah.
And you get to see the announcers and the whole production of how their show was put together. Some of them great, some of them not so great, and those are entertaining too. I've watched so many of the Portland wrestling television show, and it's delightfully cheesy and low budget, but also has the feeling of a good real wrestling show too. And I love it. I like watching the whole show.
Yeah, and even like if you go and watch some of these ones for World Class, you'll get to see, I believe it's Bill Mercer or Bill Mirror, I believe is the name. Or help me out here, Bob Spokes. The announcer for World Class. It's Bill something.
Yeah, it's not coming to me right at this moment, but I know he had been a sports announcer for years in Texas, and everybody knew him.
Yeah, and he was classic in a lot of these episodes. Things that because they were doing pre-tapes of some of these segments as well too. There's the one where he gets thrown down the water slide at a water park by one of the boys, and they cut the scenes of him going down the slide the entire way in his business suit and everything like that. And right away I'm watching this and I'm thinking, this reminds me of the stuff that I used to like about Gene Okerlund doing some of the segments with the boys in the back in the day with WWF.
And that's how you knew they were a team too, just like Okerlund as well. He was one of the boys. He rode with the boys. He drank with the boys. Everything like that. He was one of the boys. So probably same thing here. They knew that they could get away with throwing him down the water slide in his suit, and then, damn it made such a good shot. We got to include this in the show. Let's do it a few more times and get all the angles.
Yeah, and that was the best part about pre-tapes, is that you could go that direction and do some of that fun stuff. And it was funny, but at the same time not insulting, because you're talking about, you're talking about a big boy wrestler picking up and taking an announcer and dumping him down a water slide. That can be comical. It doesn't really undersell anybody's ability at the same time, and it's fantastic. Ed coming in right now saying, I used to love watching WCCW and AWA shows from the Showboat Casino right there. So, and there's a link up with these two companies that I've got in my notes as well here. And seeing as Ed brought it up, like there was times where the two companies would put their best of the best against each other and work hand in hand for a combined show.
And this is how the business used to be. It hasn't been like this in a long time, but they used to work together so that everybody made money until one promoter, and you know who I'm talking about, VKM, decided he wanted everything. I ain't working with you guys anymore. I want it all, and I'm taking it all. Classic narcissistic, psychopathic businessman move right there.
Yeah. Now we get to one of the sad moments in the history of WCCW and the Von Erich family, and anybody who's watched the movie would know that David Von Erich, kind of at that moment when he was starting to work with Ric Flair, he was going to get the opportunity to go all around the world, 6 months of travel to be working with Ric Flair, to be at the top of the game, to possibly inevitably become the next NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. Mm-hmm. And the way, and I know in the movie they kind of play out this scene too, but I know I've heard Kerry Von Erich talk about it too, was right before the trip to Japan. He remembers David not looking well, being pale as a ghost, being sick, and he remembers, I think he said, kissing him on his forehead and saying, "Don't go over to Japan and die on me. Don't do it." And just kind of that whole thing that he said, and then no, lo and behold, David goes over there. He was out eating with some of the boys, apparently, from my understanding, like 2 steak dinners or something that David managed to pound down at the dinner time. Went back up to his room with one of the other guys, told him that he was going to call his wife, and the guy leaves the room to allow him to do so, and they found him in the exact position that he had left him in on the bed there, having had a ruptured stomach at the time, and causing him to end up choking and dying in the night.
Oh, it was so shocking. I remember this when it happened. Of course, no internet, or it wasn't on TV news or anything like that, but we were following in the magazines, and I knew that David Von Erich was the apple of Fritz's eye, and he was only 25 or 27 or whatever, but he was looking like he was going to be fast-tracked to be an NWA champion. As in the day, the champ would tour all the territories and give good matches to their top stars, but every territory, at least at some point in turn, would get a chance for their top guy to hold that belt, the World Championship, the NWA Championship, just to legitimize their territory. This is how they all work together, and David was going to get that chance, and then we just read that he died of I think what they said at the time was a stomach infection, or some kind of a virus of his stomach, and none of us could believe it. He was so big and athletic and everything. And how does a young guy die of, seemingly natural causes at such a young age like that? It was really baffling and really sad. But I think most people at the time took it as, wow, that's a fluke occurrence. I mean, that probably shouldn't have happened. And then, I mean, what was to come was far worse. But I think it was just looked at as an anomaly at the time.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean, it's they play on it well in the movie and stuff like that as well too. But it is what has been said. There is a lot of rumors out there about having it not been what it was, and that he could have been poisoned. And there's a lot of the rabbit hole that you can go down with conspiracy theories about the death of David Von Erich. But from everything that's been said, it really does seem that the stomach issue was the problem, that he had been sick and continued to go through. And you can imagine if you've got like a stomach issue, some sort of problem inside the stomach there that hasn't been treated, and you're going and you're taking bumps and you're taking kicks and you're taking all these things across the world and travel, never resting your body properly. I'd imagine that kind of effect. Plus, I'd imagine it's not exactly the healthy eating, that he was doing either, when you pounded back 2 steak dinners at supper time there and everything, when you've already got stomach issues. I could imagine that it's that kind of stuff that took its toll inevitably on David.
Sure, who knows? I don't even think it's so precisely known at this time. I don't know if it ever was, or what the family released or anything like that either. I know Fritz really was pushing the narrative that he was just sick and stuff like that. Some of the wrestlers that had been in that hotel in Japan say that some guys were flushing some stuff down the toilet before the police got there or the ambulance got there, so that opened a door to different kinds of rumors. I don't know what to believe. I don't know any of the people personally involved in this, so I can't have an opinion, but rampant with speculation over the years, for sure.
For sure. So after the death of David Von Erich, that it was after that they decided that it was going to be Kerry Von Erich that was going to get the next opportunity at Ric Flair for the NWA's World Heavyweight Championship. This was to take place in the Texas Stadium, and this was kind of the NWA's way of saying David was supposed to be the guy, but here you go. We're going to give one of the boys an opportunity at the NWA World Heavyweight Championship in honor of David. It was really done mostly in honor of David, that nobody, I think, at the time thought Kerry was at that point ready to be the top NWA guy.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And also to say at the time that Kerry was going through some stuff. The whole family was going through some stuff after David's passing. Everybody says Fritz was never the same after that. But he wasn't going to change his plan. He wanted his boys to be around that NWA title, to have it around their waist, so that would legitimize the Dallas territory to the rest of the wrestling world, and to legitimize the Von Erich family as top guys in the entire wrestling business. And then another part of it, as a promoter, Fritz has got to see it, unfortunately, as an opportunity. The Texas, the whole state was mourning David's death. This, like we talked about them being the sons of Texas kind of thing. Everyone was grief-stricken about David, everybody. So you knew that if we have a special match in David's honor, we're going to get the whole stadium. You knew that everybody was going to come out. And what an atmosphere. Again, I wasn't there, but if you watch the tapes of that, people are just weeping in the audience. Like, the whole crowd is weeping at times during that show. Very, very emotional scene. And that's kind of why it sticks out as one of the biggest and most important and most memorable shows of probably the entire 80s, and certainly of Texas wrestling. The David Von Erich Memorial Show, just highly attended, highly loved. And then, of course, the finish of the show, a complete raising up of the Von Erich family, the first world champion, Kerry gets the backslide pin on Ric Flair. And boy, that building just erupts with joy. And again, now the tears are flowing again as the boys come out and raise Kerry up with the belt. Very special moment in wrestling. Shows you the kind of emotional pop you can get with the right build-up.
And then also the promo that came about where talking about David has the best seat in the house to watch every bit of the action from right above kind of thing. I mean, it really, really was an emotional night, but emotional night, yes, but 18 days later, not so great because the NWA made the decision to put the belt back on Ric Flair, ending the run of Kerry Von Erich and really ending any run for the Von Erich family when it came to the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. From there, that was right at the time the Mike, just shortly after that, the Mike actually gets injured. I know in the movie they jumped to Kerry's motorcycle thing, which actually comes about a couple of years after the whole crowning of Kerry Von Erich as the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. But Mike Von Erich ends up getting that shoulder injury, goes into the hospital to get routine shoulder surgery, and ends up picking up an infection and getting what's known as toxic shock syndrome. And this really messed Mike up permanently after this one. Yes, he did recover. He did not pass away as a result of the toxic shock syndrome, but you could tell, and they portrayed it well in the movie as well too. But if you go back and watch that same press conference that he's sitting there doing with Kevin Von Erich, you can tell as you look in those eyes, Mike was not the same after coming out of that situation.
Yeah. And with all respect to Mike, he wasn't what his older brothers were either. Not physically, not in his looks. There was nothing wrong with the guy, but he didn't look like a wrestler like those guys did. He wasn't involved in the high school and collegiate athletics that built his older brothers up into strong-looking wrestlers and stuff like that. He was, closer to the baby of the family sort of thing, and he kind of wanted to get into wrestling, but he wasn't completely into it. He kind of thought he had to because he wanted his dad's approval and all that, but he didn't have it like the older boys did. And then with his bout with illness there and stuff, yeah, that press conference you talk about, and I remember the pictures of him in the magazines, his eyes look different, man. Like he's got the kind of bags under his eyes and they look gray, and he looked like someone who had confronted death, who had come very, very close to dying. And I think a lot of people aren't the same after that, and he's one of them.
He really was, and it would catch up with him eventually. But before we get to what inevitably would happen to Mike, there was other things going on within the world of class championship wrestling, and one that would be very detrimental to the Von Erichs' good-natured name up until this point. They had always been known as a very honest family, always giving you the truth, always telling you exactly what's going on, until we got the introduction of Lance Von Erich, a.k.a. Kevin Von. And while he does appear in the Iron Claw, they don't really go into depth on this portion of the Iron Claw because, yes, this particular wrestler portrayed by one Maxwell Jacob Freeman inside the Iron Claw was kind of their idea of bringing in a new member to the Von Erich family by saying that this was, the son of Waldo Von Erich, if I'm not mistaken, and that this was essentially a cousin to the Von Erich sons. And once somebody kind of let the cat out of the bag that this guy definitely wasn't a Von Erich by any sense of the word, because they knew where he had gone to school, they knew all the information about Kevin Von himself, so the people called bullshit. And they started to say that the Von Erichs were liars and that was not the Von Erichs that they knew and grew up on.
Yeah, you can't blame the people for saying that too, but I can also understand what Fritz was thinking too. I mean, he had this plan for these, like we talked about before, these 3 or 4 or 5 handsome sons to be his big baby faces in his company. And then he started running out of sons. I'm sorry to say it if that sounds callous like that, but they started running out of Von Erichs. So they had to make one, right? This is wrestling. It doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be legitimate. If if you're just presenting it that way. But in the time of kayfabe, if the fans find out, they aren't going to like that, because that's a bold-faced lie to them. And that's when the carpet started to come out from the company too. Not only the grief and the sadness and the loss of losing some of their favorite wrestlers. And remember, some of these young girls in Texas were in love with the boys, like legitimately in love, like girls and boys are with pop stars and movie stars and such like that. They loved them, and it was, I think, difficult for some of those fans to deal with that grief. And some people stopped going to the shows because it was painful, and some people thought that their roster wasn't as strong with the Von Erichs. And then the whole Lance thing, yeah, it started eating away at the amounts of business they were doing. And Fritz was having to scramble to try and keep it going because he was now getting short on top stars.
But one top star he did end up having for a short period of time here, Papa Smokes, and someone I want to talk about, because after going back and watching his work, I absolutely love this guy, and I'm talking about Gino Hernandez. What a performer that was gone way too soon. Gino Hernandez was that sly, conniving dirtbag of a heel kind of thing. It just, that punchable, arrogant face that works so well in professional wrestling. He had the look. He could talk the talk. He was something else. And he elevated Chris Adams, who had turned heel to really no avail. Chris Adams wasn't necessarily taken seriously as a heel because he had been such a gentleman grappler prior to that, an English gentleman grappler. And this was the catalyst that he needed to kind of elevate him a bit, was the dirty talk and sly talk and Gino Hernandez. This was the MJF before there was an MJF right here in Gino Hernandez. This guy was cool. He was slick, but man, you wanted to slap the taste out of his mouth.
Yeah, and everybody thinks Hernandez was going to be a big thing later in his career. He was the next Roddy Piper, or nowadays he would be like a Austin Theory or a Miz or an MJF kind of thing. Great ring work, but better than that, great heel work, working with the crowd, working with the referee, working with his opponent, all to get the ire of the fans. This guy could really get a room of wrestling fans screaming at him. Plus, he was living a high life outside the ring, dating Farrah Fawcett. I mean, damn, in the 80s, that's, I don't know what that would be like, dating Taylor Swift or Scarlett Johansson or something. Now, that's a famous girlfriend to have. So he was getting in magazines and stuff. Yeah, he could have been the next Ric Flair. I mean, almost to that level, probably, but I guess we'll never know, because how old was Hernandez when he passed away? 26, 7, like not very old at all.
Yeah, I will look it up right now here for us so we can get confirmation. But again, like his demons got the best of him, drugs got the best of him, just like it did with a lot of people at the time. And it was just very unfortunate that we never got to see. Yeah, 28 years old, Pop Smokes, 28 years old. But we lost Gino Hernandez, and possibly a future world champion, somebody who could have really taken the wrestling world by storm.
Yeah, he was a beauty, and I know that Latino people at the time looked up to him too, as representing in a big way in a large wrestling market, big Latino audience in Texas. So he had all of that behind him. Yeah, and he had everything ahead of him in his career too. And it's just sad what happened. Still some mystery about it, as far as I've ever known, that he had overdosed on drugs of some kind. But there's talk of conspiracy theory too, that he might have gotten in with the wrong people, pissed somebody off, and was maybe helped along to his death. I'm not sure, but people will keep flapping their gums over that stuff as long as there's a story to talk about.
You bet. Yeah, Gino. Sorry, Ed saying, well, Gino was the Travis Kelsey of our time. Thanks for that, Ed. But
a lot more personality than Kelsey, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was so after they had lost Gino now on top of everything, WCCW, sorry, decided to withdraw from the National Wrestling Alliance at this point in time. They completely withdrew from working with the NWA.
Yeah, I don't know the complete details behind that, but I think by this time they didn't have a strong enough internal roster to have a candidate that would stand at the top that would have NWA championship matches, not someone that they completely felt comfortable with or wanted to get behind, because now at this point, uh, a lot of the Von Erich brothers are feeling a little crushed by all the bad news that they've had. Kerry's gone up to New York to be the Texas Tornado, and yeah, there's not much going on back in that Fed. So I imagine Fritz didn't want to pay the membership fees to the NWA anymore, and probably was paying them booking fees as well. And as his revenue went down, it became economically unfeasible to still be a member of the NWA, especially when you don't have a guy to push in championship matches when the champion comes to town.
Yeah, and it was actually prior to Kerry's run going to work with Vince in the WWF as the Texas Tornado, because it was shortly after the withdrawal from the NWA that Kerry Von Erich had his accident, which his motorcycle accident would lead to him losing his foot entirely. So that part of the Iron Claw there, 100% true. Kerry Von Erich lost his foot and had to relearn how to wrestle without having an actual foot there. Something that, as a kid, I remember watching the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, inside of a ring, and I would have never been able to tell you one time that guy was missing a foot when he was performing in that ring.
Well, and nobody knew that until after he died, too, is he kept that amputation secret. Everybody knew that motorcycle accident had been really, really serious, and he was badly, badly hurt. But he didn't tell anybody about that amputation because he knew that it would negatively affect his possible career going forward if he was able to get back in the ring. So again, I remember watching Texas Tornado live and saying, "Oh, damn, that's Kerry Von Erich from Texas. That's interesting."
Yeah.
I don't think I consciously noticed it at the time, but if you watch those matches now compared to his Texas work, you can see that he's not as light of foot as he is, and not as agile and not as springy as he is in his earlier work in Texas. Yeah, no shit. Especially because that's the 80s and they didn't have very good prosthetics. Now you can get a prosthetic foot that has a spring in it, that you can load the spring and it will give you that spring. You can jump with it and still walk, and it flexes and all that stuff. He didn't have one of those. He had a mannequin's foot that you'd strap on, and he started wearing the tall boots up to your knee, like the Hulk Hogan style boots, the big tall ones. And he dressed by himself in the dressing room. Nobody knew about that. And even all his fellow wrestlers were so surprised to hear that he was missing his foot all that time. Nobody knew.
Which, is a real testament to his ability inside of a professional wrestling ring to be able to hide that and still be able to perform at that level. And like you said, going back now, knowing it is a different story looking at it. But like I said, as a kid watching it, I used to think this guy's fantastic inside of a professional ring. And still, not to take anything away, you go back and watch, and like that match with Mr. Perfect when he wins the Intercontinental Championship is a solid matchup on a SummerSlam card. And you can, I remember being a big fan of it, watching that as it happened, being very excited to see the Texas Tornado as the new Intercontinental Champion. And again, you had a great opponent in a guy like Mr. Perfect that was able to work with him. So it was a great thing for Kerry Von Erich. But of course, those demons were going to get the best of him here soon. But before his demons, we still haven't, Mike, this was right around the time prior to all this is when Mike took his own life. Mike could not handle, I think in his letter to his family at the end said he couldn't handle being a disappointment to the Von Erich name anymore. Ended up swallowing a whole bottle of pills and drinking some beers and going to sleep, and ended up choking on his own vomit, sadly enough, in the night. Very sad, because now this is 3 of your sons that you've lost. You've lost Jack Jr. from electrocution in Niagara Falls, and then the electrocution that led to the drowning of Jack Jr. You've lost David, and now you've lost Mike as well too. And just how these guys ever were able to bounce back and even step inside a ring. And, you know, the more you'd let the story unfold, the fact that Kevin Von Erich can be as humble as he is nowadays, when you hear him talk with all the shit that guy's been through, really blows your mind. And it's just a testament to how tough Kevin Von Erich truly is.
Yeah, and I saw, I'm not sure what show I was watching, but it was an interview with Kevin, and he talked about, he said the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life. I think he said, my whole life as a young man revolved around being a brother, and I was a brother 4 times over. And he said, now I'm not a brother anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, damn, man. Like, that's so sad. You used to have 4 brothers, and now there's just...
Oh, we lost Papa Smokes there. Hold on. Big Papa's back there, so we lost you for a moment.
Yeah, that was just a quick one, but what a kick in the gut, too. And we haven't gone through and finished this whole story yet, but talking about Kevin, damn, like, imagine the grief that guy's felt in his life and what it took to bounce back from that.
Yeah, you bet. But yeah, it was after the loss of Mike that people started to think that they had done a bit of a setup on TV, or that they had played on Fritz possibly having a heart attack on TV when they tried to resurrect an old feud with the Freebirds, but not the Freebirds with Michael P.S. Hayes at this point in time. Hayes was no longer there. We're talking about a revised Freebirds, and they do an attack in the ring on Fritz Von Erich at the time, and he ends up collapsing on his way back out. And a lot of people thought that it was either a legitimate heart attack or that he had faked a heart attack. But as the story goes, it was actually a bit of a rib injury or something like that. And just Fritz, at his advanced age at the time and stuff like that, kind of fell and collapsed over the situation. As Astrid mentioning that she needs that Taylor Swift part clipped, by the way. We will make sure to take care of the Taylor Swift clip there, and the comparison to Farrah Fawcett.
The Swifties are coming for me, aren't they? You can't put that out there, man, so they'll swarm us.
We got Taylor Swift's #1 fan in the form of Astrid Pizarro right in the chat there, Papa Smokes. So you can't say the name Taylor Swift without Astrid hearing it and being there to make sure that clip happens.
I should have known.
We're gonna have a whole playlist of Taylor Swift clips before the end of the year on our local establishment. I'm sure of it. So, but do you recall this moment in time too, Papa Smokes, with Fritz's collapse there and the kind of the backlash?
Yeah, I didn't. I had always thought that he was working it and that it was meant to be a dramatic spot. And I think that's how most of the fans ended up taking it. They weren't pleased about this spot, and it fell flat, as you think it might, right? Like, remember, we watched Ric Flair's retirement match, and he did a spot like that in the condition he was. I mean, yeah, it's believable that he might go down. I don't think it's all that funny to do that, but yeah, the fans, and kind of like the Lance Von Erich situation, the fans felt like they were being worked, felt like they were being lied to, and this didn't help Fritz's business either.
Not at all. And we're just going to say hello to Barry Monkey, who says he's here before we finished. You are, because we're taking this trip through the territories and a lot to unfold. We are getting towards the end of it here, but still a little bit to talk about, because you mentioned about how this it takes a backlash and it hurt Fritz's business. This then forced Fritz into selling a third of world-class championship wrestling, all against, the thoughts of his sons who had been with him this whole time and everything like that. But he sold a third of the company to Ken Mantel at this point in time.
Yeah, and Ken Mantel became the booker, and this actually helped the business a little bit. Mantel injected some energy, some hard work, some thought, and some good booking into this. And a lot of the talent knew Mantel from different areas, different wrestling companies, and they knew his work was solid. So for a while there was a little bit of rejuvenation of the company. Sadly, not enough to bring it back to its glory days, but Mantel pretty handy with the book there, and he got it back on track for a bit, but the writing was on the wall.
You bet, yeah. So before we talk about this next piece here, Pops folks, I do want to mention that in the movie The Iron Claw, they showed the matchup between Kevin Von Erich and Ric Flair, where the Iron Claw was placed on Flair, the spot of color was placed, and everything like that. So I don't want to go over it too much, but I do want to talk about one that they didn't necessarily include in the Iron Claw, and I'm talking about Super Clash 3. This was World Class Championship Wrestling, tying into your boys, Vern Gagne's AWA Wrestling, where the main event was booked between Kerry Von Erich and Jerry Lawler. Jerry the King Lawler was there, and in a controversial decision, this match was stopped due to the laceration on the eye of Kerry Von Erich, like the mass amount of blood as he is digging that Iron Claw onto Ric Flair, and you think that quite possibly the referee is calling for the decision in Von Erich's favor, but you see many times the ref checking that eye, and he finally says enough is enough and calls for the match. And in listening to it, they also said that Kerry had actually cut himself across his arm or something like that prior to going into this matchup, and they had to do a quick job to kind of patch him up and get him prepared to go out there and everything. And they said they felt like he wasn't quite right. Like his head was not in it. He might have been, most likely was on something, but we don't want to speculate here because we do know he had his problems with drug abuse. But even, Ric Flair said that you could see it in his eyes. He wasn't quite the same person that he was before. Or Lawler said that he wasn't quite the same person.
Yeah.
He was before.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people were saying that by this time. I've read and heard about stories of sometimes they couldn't find Kerry like 10 minutes before his match. They knew he was in the arena somewhere. They wouldn't know where he was. They'd be looking for him madly, and he'd be sleeping in the car or sleeping in some back room somewhere, and he would get up and, who am I working with tonight? And he didn't know, and he couldn't remember the matches, and guys were carrying him through, and Ric Flair told stories of I had to call everything to him like 3 times during the match. This is before matches were choreographed and memorized, of course. This is in the days when the heel would always call the match, and when they had to carry him, he was a shadow of himself, and I think that was sad for a lot of the fans too, because they could see the change too. Even when he walked out to the ring, you could see that vacant look in his eye. He didn't connect with the fans. He didn't make the eye contact. He didn't have the smile. And I think it was perfectly obvious to a lot of the fan base that things weren't going well in the family and that there were some issues coming up.
You bet there was. And it was shortly after this that then inevitably we would see the end of World Class Championship Wrestling entirely, as the company would be sold to Jerry Jarrett, who would then change it to the USWA after that. And that inevitably is the story of the World Class Championship Wrestling. We'll finish the Von Erich story here, but just that moment when Jerry Jarrett bought it all out, Papa Smokes, and it came to a close.
Yeah, it was an inevitability at that time. Wrestling companies don't last forever. If a promoter manages to find some of that lightning in a bottle, it's great, and you might get 3, 4, 5, 6 good years out of that. But after that, if you don't have all your ducks in a row, then your business is probably going to drop off, at least for a while. And that's what a lot of promoters have to deal with, is you have a hot period and then it'll cool off for a while. So during that cooling off period, you've got to be working hard. You've got to keep your shows good. You have to keep your fan base up as good as you can. And you have to do that long-term booking that promises the fans that they're going to get some hot programs coming up in the near future. They will come back if you give them more of what they liked before, but it's not easy. And if people think booking's easy, it's not easy. I've never been a booker, but I've studied some of this stuff, and okay, you can make, especially if you have weekly TV shows like some of these territories did too. You got to do a week of TV every week. Now you're doing the live shows. Now you're doing the spot shows. And now you're doing your large events too. So think of what 1 year of that is: 50 or 52 TV shows, plus your live events, plus your big shows. Okay, that's a whole year. Now you got to do another year, another year, another year, sometimes with the same talent, sometimes with a whole bunch of different talent. It's tough, man. It's really tough. And it's a jigsaw puzzle that you have to figure out. Use not only your knowledge of the business, but your creativity as well, and seeing the potential in your talent, finding the right spot on the card, finding the right angle, finding the right gimmick, all that stuff, and then bringing it all together so that it works cohesively as one wrestling company or federation. It ain't easy. And ask Tony Khan about that. He's wrestling with a huge octopus of problems, all kinds of talent with egos and creative desires that they want fulfilled, and booking ideas and all this other stuff that doesn't even make any sense. It's tough, man, and it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, and yeah, it's the year-to-year part of booking that's difficult, I think.
It really is. Barry mentioning that TNA might live forever. Its history has been a list of near-death experiences. You might be right about that there, Barry. But as we close a chapter on WCCW, we hadn't quite closed the chapter on the Von Erich family, because this is when more tragedy would strike the family, and we would then eventually lose both Chris and Kerry Von Erich. Chris, who was the first of the two to go, and this is where I'll explain how the Iron Claw did this a little differently. So in the Iron Claw, when they show Kerry's passing, they show at the house Kevin finding Kerry's body, which is not the actual truth of how Kerry's finding came about. The finding of Chris's body was what Kevin was involved with. As the story goes from Kevin Von Erich himself, he says that he had gone out, I think it's by a portion of the land or whatever that they used to like to hang out and everything. And Chris was sitting there, and when he pulled up, Chris said to him, "Did you get my note?" To which Kevin replied, "No, I didn't." And he said, "Okay." And they were just having a bit of a conversation. Chris told Kevin, "I wanted some alone time, just clearing my head or whatever." And Kevin ended up going back to the house to give him that alone time, finds the note that, basically tells he's had enough. He's gonna end things. And by the time he got back out there, it was too late. Chris was already passed away, and he actually had rolled out there with his mother as well too. Something that he says is an image that would never get out of her head, is seeing her son dead there. Oh, are we back? Did we make it?
We're back. Yeah, we're back.
All right, that was both of us on that account there, Papa Spokes. So
Yeah.
that was an odd one. I apologize to everybody right at that moment of all times too. But as I was saying, yes, they had found Chris's body. That was that experience. It was actually Fritz who had found Kerry's body, and the way they portrayed Kerry's death was, yes, he did shoot himself. He was at that particular tree that they show. I think, as they describe it, might have been actually further from the house in all reality, but that was the tree that that was their favorite tree to play in as young boys and everything like that. And that is where Kerry ended his own life. And I believe that the letter they use in the movie from Kerry about "Tonight I walk with my brothers" is the finishing line of Kerry's suicide letter that he had left to the family and everything like that, which I mean, it's sad in actuality of the actual story, but the way they portrayed it in the Iron Claw, despite a couple of tweaks to it, is still very impactful and still very sad. And that moment when he does walk with his brothers in that sequence and goes and gives them a hug and meets his older brother, Jack Jr., for the very first time, that scene is a very touching moment and great direction in that movie.
Yeah, and it's one of those real life situations. You don't have to add much to make it more sad. I mean, there's nothing you need to add to this story that could make it more tragic. And yeah, they'll tweak it just a little bit in order to make the storytelling of the movie make sense. But yeah, there's not much more you can add to make this more sad. It's a story of a family, and we all have a family, and to imagine this happening within how many years between David's death and Chris's at the very end there. It's not really very many years.
Yeah, it was a
10 or 15.
Like it's a lot in a short period of time to be losing. I mean, for Fritz and his wife to lose all these sons, for Kevin to lose all his brothers, for Kevin's kid to lose the kids to lose their uncles as well too. And we're talking, and again in the movie they portray Kevin as having two sons. Legitimately, he does. They would not have been the age of the two boys portrayed in the movie itself. So 1981 was the first child that they had, and that is their oldest daughter, who has 4 children of her own now. They had another daughter, I believe, in 85. Then I believe Ross Von Erich, who we've seen in MLW, was born around 89. And it was about 1993, the year that Kerry had taken his life, that Marshall was actually born, if I'm not mistaken. So again, the boys were actually a lot younger than what they're portrayed in the movie. And I believe that the movie did that because then it's easy to make that connection to the legacy continues on through Kevin Von Erich's boys, Ross and Marshall, within the world of professional wrestling. As we say hello to Bobby Stath, Bobby Petito joining us up in the house.
All right.
How you doing, Bobby? But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I ask you a quick question while we're talking about the third generation people, Ross, Marshall? There was a girl, Lacey Von Erich, that was a wrestler for a time.
Yeah.
Who is her parents? Who are her parents?
That's a very strong question there, Papa Spokes. So
like Kev,
Lacey Dawn Adkisson, born in 1986, a retired American professional wrestler, best known by her ring name Lacey Von Erich, and is the daughter of Kerry Von Erich and the granddaughter of Fritz Von Erich. Yeah, this is Kerry's
daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Kerry's daughter is Lacey Von Erich. Yes, so she is legitimately part of the family as well too.
Yeah, I felt like I should know that, but I don't think I ever thought of it.
Yeah. But yes, and Bobby's saying he's doing great. That's great to hear, Bobby. But yeah, it's a lot of tragedy within the Von Erich family. It always has existed, and it's a sad story. Anybody who gets the opportunity, go watch The Iron Claw. Go watch. There is a great documentary that, believe it or not, the WWE produced back in 2007 about the rise and fall of world-class championship wrestling, where Kevin Von Erich narrates most of this. And I believe that comment that you mentioned about that interview you saw, Papa Spokes, is taken directly from that 2-hour documentary. And it goes through everything in full detail, with Kevin telling the stories and going through everything that happened and reliving this thing. And the fact that Kevin Von Erich can sit there and tell these stories and shares them with the world and all these kind of things, it's a testament to him as a person, that he's been strong through all these years, that he continues to live a good, strong, healthy life. Him and his wife now living in Hawaii. They have a business of their own out there. They've raised a great family. We know Marshall has got 2 young boys now as well too, that, hopefully maybe one day we'll see them carry on the Von Erich name in professional wrestling. Who knows? But it was also great to see Ross and Marshall get an opportunity on AEW recently with Kevin at their side too. I love seeing the boys get their chances in pro wrestling.
For sure. And I think they're completely marketable as pro wrestlers. One thing, they got the family name behind them, but for another, look at the two. They're athletic, they're handsome, just like their uncles. They have that same appeal as we've seen them as baby faces. I don't see why you'd have them as anything but baby faces. The way those guys look and the kind of charisma they have, I've always thought they'll make that jump to a bigger level at some point, but they haven't yet. I almost wonder if they have a lot of other stuff besides wrestling going on in their lives. You talk about Marshall's got a couple of kids now, possibly Ross does too, but I always wondered if those guys were full-time wrestlers, even during the time they were at MLW, because it seems like they have other concerns in their lives and they don't give wrestling 100% of their attention. But that could just be my speculation.
They could be tied to the family business as well, too. Might be working within the family business that Kevin started with his wife there. And that's quite possible. Maybe they only wrestle when they feel they want to or need to, kind of thing. And maybe that's the best thing for them, is to only take the spots that they want to take and do it on their terms and stuff like that, so that they can pick them. And I was glad to see them back, because it's been quite some time. And I know for a while there, prior to the birth of their second son, I had been talking quite heavily with Marshall about coming here on Ring Respect Radio and doing a interview with him and his brother. I'm going to reach out again. I'm going to give it another shot here, Papa Smokes. Shot in the dark. See if we can get the Von Erich boys on a future episode of the show. Would be great. But yeah, man, it's about all I've got to bring to the table when it comes to World Class Championship Wrestling, about the the Texas territory and the Von Erich family. Anything else that you want to add to this before we go to Bobby's next comment and kind of wrap things up?
Not really too much, but I wanted to say that I'm thrilled to be finally starting the Trip Through the Territory series. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be insightful for the listeners. I hope that everyone will keep chatting with us, asking questions, giving comments and opinions. And let's talk about this. Let's talk about all these territories, and let's all learn some history together that helps us understand the business the way it is now.
You bet. And I learned a ton even just doing this research on this, outside of the stuff I already knew. I've watched some great matches in the process. So yeah, there's a lot that can be said, and a lot can be learned from the classics of professional wrestling. And that's what's being done. And we're happy to bring it to you here. We're going to do this once a month, I believe, Pop Smokes. I think it's been very successful here tonight. Trip Through the Territories once a month here on Ring Respect Radio, added to our growing list of fun things that we do here on the show. And speaking of those fun things, let's let the people know we've got next week. We've got our trivia show coming back here. It's What the Fuck Do We Know About Wrestling Pub Trivia Night, and the title's back on the line. I know Bobby Stats, he's been looking for an opportunity to win that YouTube championship back. So Bobby, next Thursday, make sure 9:05 Eastern, my friend, you better be here. Get ready for that trivia show, because we're going to be bringing it back next week. And then the week after that, Papa Smokes, I don't know if we have anything officially planned, but here's what I was thinking, and I'm going to run this by you live on the air and put you on the spot. I'm thinking, not only do we do a little bit of a review of a book that we read recently about the original Sheik, but I'm thinking that night we're also going to go back and do one of we did this once before last year, and I kind of want to do it again, is our kind of picking our championship tournament. We did one for MLW there for the men's side of things. I picked a whole bunch of wrestlers, and we had everybody vote, and we inevitably made a fans champion that very night. And I'm thinking we're going to do this again coming up here on that same very night, but I'm thinking we're going to go a different topic. We're not going to do MLW. I think because we debuted this show here tonight, I want to go with some names from classic professional wrestling, some of the stars of the different territories battling it out for the Viewers Championship here on Ring Respect Radio that night.
All right, let's do it. I like this idea. So you want to take a company from the territory days, or do you want to mix them all up and have
we're doing a worldly tournament here. The Viewers' Choice is going across all the territories, Papa Smokes. We the best of the best from the different territories to decide a champion. So we're going to make it very difficult for the viewers, because there's going to be all the top names in the business at the time in that thing.
Oh wow! Okay, that sounds like a project. All right, let's do it, Munson. That sounds fun.
It's perfect. We're going to make that happen, but. Yeah, that's it on that side of things. I want to go to the comment here from Bobby Stats saying that Kojima is going to take, and Okamura, I believe that's the pronunciation, could form a tag team in the MLW tag team division. That would, hey, let's bring on some more tag teams in that MLW division. I'd be more than happy for that. They got to do something to boost things up and avoid disastrous Kings of Coliseum like pay-per-views going forward for sure. There was a real disconnect there. Some of it was just not right. And I know people, I've been getting a lot of slack for this, Papa Smokes. I've been slagging Sami Callihan all week long, and he was on the screen 3 goddamn times on this MLW show. 3. I don't want Sami Callihan on my damn screen once, but apparently he's beloved by a lot of people who tune into our show and everything like that. I can't stand the guy, and I couldn't stand him on this night. I can't stand him on any other night, and he only ruined the experience that much more for me. It was like as if I hadn't seen his ass enough with the first appearance. He shows up after the Taipei death match of garbage that it just occurred there as well, too, to interfere, because why not make the calling an even bigger thing? Remove Raven and bring in Sami Callihan as a replacement so that the calling does not die. It carries on through Sami goddamn Callihan. Oh, why? But on the plus note, Pop Smokes, there was a very, very interesting blip in the video feed towards the end of Kings of Coliseum. And if you slow it down, it was a Contra blip. A Contra blip made its way into the Jacob Fatu match at the end of the night there, which I got my attention rolling. So as bad as what I thought most of the card was, those last 2 matches, the match Alex Kane had, fantastic. And then that last match was great as well, too. And that little blip was enough for me to go, oh, shit, what do they got cooking here? Is this Contra Jacob Fatu, or is Contra returning to come after Jacob Fatu? Because, again, Contra blips only used to occur in the matchups of people that were mostly targets to that of Contra.
Very interesting, Munson. Very interesting. Long-term storytelling. But they're always going to give a little hint about that, too. And damn, does that suggest then that Joseph Samael might come back with a faction to battle Fatu, or will he come back with Fatu as his main guy? Very interesting, Munson.
There's Mr. Atrocity Cruel making his way back to the company as well, too. All sorts of things that you could speculate over this whole thing. And get out of here, Riddle versus Orange Cassidy versus Sami Callihan. Bite me. Go on.
Jay White.
Yeah. I know it might be here week after next when TNA have made a complete cluster F of the relaunch. I'm 99% sure Impact can balls it up. Oh, balls it up. There we go. Okay. Clever getting around that the block on Twitch there, Barry. Obviously, I don't say that to my fellow TNA fans. They'd lynch me. I'm looking forward to TNA personally this Saturday. I think it's a good looking card, and I'm looking forward to being able to do the post show with Astrid. I think I'm gonna have a good time. So don't ruin my good time. Yeah, Zeta Steel is better than Sami Callihan. Certainly, Zeta Steel is better than a lot of people because almost everybody's better than Sami Callihan in my opinion. But
I got to agree with you there.
I digress. Some people like that guy. Not for me, not for Papa Smokes. Somebody signed him and take him away. I even made an offer to Ed. I said we would trade Sami Callihan for who was it that I said we'd take over in MLW there, Ed, that you don't like from the NXT roster? I think it was Von Wagner. As bad as you think Von Wagner is, I'd take Von Wagner over Sami Callihan because I'm not as familiar with Von Wagner's mistakes yet. So I don't have to be tired of his antics. So bring it on. Bring it on. Yeah, Von Wagner it was.
Bud Heavy, anybody.
Oh, yeah, let's get Bud Heavy back. That would be great. She's a real deal, and Sami Callihan isn't a real deal. See, Bobby agrees with us.
Yeah, Bobby. Bobby knows.
Deal was accepted. Perfect. Let's sign it on the dotted line. Callihan can go back to his loser hacker gimmick that he had when he was in NXT the first time that went absolutely nowhere. But I digress. Let's not rag on people on the professional wrestling business here tonight. I want to end on a good note. I want to end on a good note.
I had a few good ones.
I know. But
That
on a good
warthog.
note, we had fun tonight. We had a great time. I think this was a successful show, Papa Smokes. I think we were able to have fun while learning at the same time, and I love that experience.
No, same with me. I want to learn and I want to help other people learn. And like I say, it's a springboard towards understanding today's business more thoroughly with a foundation of history to rest upon.
Agreed, 100%. Well, that brings us kind of to an end. I hope everyone sticks around so we can raid out here right away. But before that raid takes place, we got to go over to the most expensive part of any Ring Respect radio show, and that's the most expensive ticker on the planet, Papa Smokes' ticker. Let them know where they can find you.
All right, Munson. I am on Elon Musk's free speech wonderland, the platform known as X. I am at smokes_papa. And then you can find me on the Twitch side of things at papa_smokes_.
You bet. Bobby Zane, Alex Canis, Satoshi Kojima will be great at the next MLW Super Fight. I agree. But Sami Callihan had to get in between that whole announcement as well, too. So don't get me started on the Sami Callihan crap. Please, 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 please. As we are going on over, that was Papa Smokes' ticker. I'm going to pop my ticker up on the screen there for you so you can find all the different socials where you can reach out to me, Bobby Munson, as well as find me right here on the channel. Of course, Saturday night with Astro Pizarro doing the TNA Hard to Kill post show. And then you're going to be able to find me Sunday on a brand new stream of Point of View where you can choose the topics and I will talk about them with you while gaming on stream. As well as next Thursday, like we said, Trivia Night returns to Ring Respect Radio. And we are heading on over to Wrestling Leva over on Twitch right now with the raid. So just stick around for that. Say hello for us. Looks like she's just doing some chatting, but that's okay. Sending that raid over her way. Say hello on behalf of the Video Bros as we wrap up another Ring Respect Radio. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next Thursday for Pub Trivia Night. Take care, everybody.